What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Twink Revolution. I'm Sam.
I'm Gian.
And unfortunate news, SF Pride is canceled.
Oh no!
I know, I'm so
Please,
sad.
No, don't.
No.
Oh no! Put it back.
Oh no.
So there is some upside to this whole coronavirus crisis. Then,
Yeah.
we got something good out of it. I mean, for all we've had to put up with, and all the sort of deprivations and the indignities of quarantine and lockdown, at least Pride is not one of them.
True. I mean, aren't you saying you love seeing all the rainbows and designer brands being like, look, I'm Pride. I'm wearing a rainbow dress. It's like $700.
Oh no! See, my favorite part is Wells Fargo rebranding all its ATMs for the the month of June as rainbow shit.
Have a Raytheon drone fly by the air show and
do some rainbow smoke trails.
Yeah.
Rainbow predator drones, rainbow bombs. Yeah, no, it's just it's a nightmare of corporatism.
It's beautiful.
The SFPD puts rainbow flag badges on themselves as they beat people to death and shoot them
With their assault weapons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the number of fucking assault rifles at Pride.
I thought they weren't supposed to have those. Gun control.
It's okay. They're the good guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the solution to a bad guy with a gun is 3,000 heavily armed police with guns.
Love it.
Yeah. No, they say they're going to do it next year instead.
Yeah, of course they're going to do it next year. They're going to be in a
I just thought it was canceled forever.
Oh.
I was hoping this was the end for Pride.
Do you think Tel Aviv Pride will be canceled?
No, rain or shine. That's going forward. How are we going to believe that the state of Israel is a moral and just entity that respects the rights of LGBT people, unlike its savage barbarian neighbors?
Yeah.
If not for Tel Aviv Pride.
They'll establish a gay military junta and force every single person outside their houses for the Pride Festival.
Yes. Yeah, it's the opposite of anti-lockdown. It's get the fuck out of your house and celebrate LGBT people this one day here. It's great.
As the parade go on, anyone caught in her house is executed in the square
Hell
with
yeah.
rainbow bullets.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's if you're gay, you get to shoot one homophobe.
Or the bullet, when it shoots by, sounds like Cher's "Do you believe in life after love?"
Yeah, it's an amazing feat of military engineering.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, it's weird that DARPA grant of $7 billion went to developing the Cher bullet. But hey, now we have it, and so this is why we rule the world.
That's amazing. I hope it actually becomes a thing one day.
Yeah.
Not the shooting, but the Cher bullet.
We'll get right on that for our the pink army that will our pink shirts we'll use nothing but Cher bullets.
Our pink shirt pink brown alliance.
Yeah, no, it's the pink red pink brown alliance. It's one in the pink. Never mind. The stock market's doing great, Sam. Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Yeah, how's your net worth doing now? You've checked them with your broker?
My net worth's actually gone up because I haven't been paying any money for transit or anything.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Rich bitch.
It's okay, I'm furloughed soon, so.
Yeah, you'll do fine.
Yeah, gonna start my OnlyFans, guys. Everyone subscribe.
Oh man, it's okay. I think what was it 2/3 of Americans managed to pay rent last month?
It was only half the country.
Oh, half. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so what do we think? Do it over under on this time around?
I'm gonna go with 60%. Don't pay rent.
Only in the spirit of the Occupy movement, I think it's going to be 1% will be able to pay rent.
Oh, I meant 60% can't pay rent.
Yeah, no, I'm saying 99% will not be able to pay rent next month, and 1% will.
Isn't there a 98% thing too of a movement?
No, is that some tax protest bullshit? And that's
it's the tax thing.
Yeah.
I was oh.
Yeah, and that's some constitutional.
I'm going for
textualists or something.
I'm going for 98%. Then can't pay their rent because I believe in the 2%.
I'm going with only people with soldiers billeted in their homes will be able to go in. I'm a Third Amendment rights advocate now.
Wait, so you don't want them in the house, or you do?
I don't know.
Now, if you get rid of the
It wasn't a coherent bit I was working up here. This is
abolish the Third Amendment, have everyone have Russian hot soldiers or Chinese in your
you have to bill
household.
it. You have to bill it nothing but foreign soldiers in your house.
Oh no, all these Cuban and Russian men.
Actually, I think that's still consistent with the Third Amendment. You just can't have like federal troops. They can't
that's
force you to
true.
build them. You can voluntarily, fill your home with all the men, Sam. That's okay.
Okay.
All that government inspected meat.
Yeah. Well, what the fuck is Putin and Xi Jinping doing? Send them over, boys. I'll
Yeah.
house them.
The only troops Sam has ever respected are those that will disrespect him in a sexual manner.
Truth. I'm supporting my country and the rest of the countries.
I'm supporting other people's troops.
I'm supporting any country that has a lot of hot people.
Fair.
Yeah.
So our cult leader and Thousand-Year Reich Lord and our daddy,
Al
permanent
Sharpton.
daddy, Bernard Sanders of
Yeah.
Vermont, fresh off the back of dropping out of a race.
And the results weren't even in yet.
Yeah, no, fresh off the back of dropping out of an electoral competition. He's decided to endorse Joe Biden and scold his supporters, former supporters maybe now, who are considering not voting for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Do you feel chastised? Are you convinced now? I think you've expressed the opinion you probably won't vote for Joe Biden. So,
I will not be voting for Joe Biden or any Democrat.
but what happened to voting blue no matter who?
I don't vote blue no
Wait,
matter
what the fuck?
who.
Sorry.
What?
Never mind. I thought things weren't recording.
Oh.
And the best part is I'm not gonna edit this out.
That's fine.
This is you getting a glance into the behind the scenes is
We're not
Twinks
robots.
try and use technology.
No, I'm not voting for Joe Biden. I'm going to vote probably for Gloria LaRiva, who's the Peace and Freedom Party candidate, which is like a socialist party. And they're not going to win, but I just would rather vote third party and maybe get some more recognition.
You're not thinking Howie from the Green Party?
Is that who's running?
Yeah, apparently a lot
No,
of
I
people
don't
are into
like
this
social,
now.
I don't like social democrats.
I mean,
And
yet you were willing to support Bernie.
yeah, but he was going to win possibly.
Oh, okay. So only winning social dems.
I don't need to like anyone. I don't need to like Bernie to support him. Like, that's the thing. Everyone's like, oh, he betrayed us. It's like, he said from the beginning he's going to support the candidate. And then also, like, he's not your messiah. He's not your cult leader. Like, he's just a person to give you shit that you want him to. He's a representative. He's not a, like, spokesperson you just follow blindly. Like,
No, and it's
if Bernie-
people misunderstanding what a political project this was.
like, if Bernie suddenly was like, oh, I don't actually believe in Medicare for all, I'd be like, then, well, fuck you. Like,
Yeah, we'll find somebody else.
yeah, it's not about him. It's about the
Not me,
movement.
us. It's not just a slogan until Joe Biden wins, in which case it's apparently it's a slogan now.
And it's my issue is like people keep referring to like, oh, the movement, the Bernie movement. Like, Bernie just catalyzed a movement that was already fomenting after like the 2008 thing. He just kind of gave it a face to like push for like electoral politics.
I think that's a more optimistic reading than I would take. But certainly, I mean, he's a I think he's now trying to bend as the entire campaign for all of this campaign season.
Yeah.
Season 2 of, America's Next Top Bernie has been about trying to sort of placate or cater to the whims of like wine moms and fucking like Democratic Beltway insiders and shit.
Yeah.
And so that's what this is. This is the whole, he promised he would endorse Biden and now he's being scoldy about it because when you endorse Biden, you become a giant fucking lib. And libs love nothing better than scolding leftists. And so now Bernie has gotten on that train.
Yeah. I mean, I will say a slight part who's like, maybe he just won't do it. He's like old as shit and he has nothing. He's not going to do it again. So maybe he just won't endorse him. And just, cross
I
him?
thought he would give the endorsement as in the official hat tip of like, yes, my friend Joe Biden, as he refers to him as his friend for the 7 millionth time. I assumed he would say like, yes, I endorse him for president of the United States. He would turn off his weird Zoom session after hunting for the button for 12 minutes in a sort of awkward like, is it still on? Is it on? And then we would never hear any more about it.
Yeah, it's not going to be that.
And even if he did campaign events like he did for Hillary, that'd be fine. But it's the scolding.
And I see a bunch of Biden, blue no matter who people being like, Bernie's telling his team, so you better all do it. It's like, we're not a cult, you dumbasses. Like, no one's voting. A lot of people don't give a shit that Bernie wanted us to support Biden. We're not a cult following. I mean, some people will because they're like,
Sure,
blind
good
liberals.
on them. Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to do it. Like,
yeah.
You're probably not going to do it.
No, but I mean, Bernie's used to us as a political figurehead has now run its course. I mean, he opted out.
Yeah,
he is of no further utility, and whatever respect I have for him as a person,
yeah.
it doesn't matter. He has no political relevance anymore, and so cool, great, thanks, Bernie.
You're over. You're done.
Yep, we like you. You're cool.
And
But I've no reason to listen to Bernie's analysis on Democratic Party
No,
primaries anymore.
I mean,
Like, what the fuck why would I listen to him as opposed to like, I don't know, my raving lunatic neighbor or some shit? Like, it's the same level of credence there.
especially now because there's so few stakes for him. Like, he's not going to run again for president. He could have just stopped saying the things he was pushing, like, Donald Trump's the most dangerous president ever. Which
God, I hate that line.
I hate it so
much.
much. I was more quiet because I'm like, oh, I don't want to like give the libs something to like utilize against. Like, I have to keep it to my. But
Right?
like,
Yeah. No.
now it
we
doesn't
were
matter.
we were all happy to shut the fuck up during the primary.
Yeah.
But the primary's over. Our team lost in some sense, and so now like fuck it.
Also, all the RussiaGate shit, and like a lot of his
God, he
like
bought into a lot of that.
a lot of his staffers. Like, I saw one. Like, I mean, for one, it's like if you're a staffer and you're just waiting, maybe. I think waiting to the end until it's no longer relevant is a little problematic, and especially if they didn't push Bernie away from that. But they're like, oh, I'm not going to vote for Biden. Like, RussiaGate's stupid, and like Trump. Actually, none of them have said Trump's not the worst president ever because they probably
No,
don't
that's
believe it.
probably politically untenable among like any. If you can get a job with the Bernie campaign, that's probably a politically untenable position.
Yeah.
Did you see? Was it Kyle Kulinski, the from Secular Talk,
Yeah.
made the libs really mad by using the analogy
Mm-hmm.
of saying that Biden and Trump is like choosing between Richard Spencer or David Duke, and
It is.
for one, liberals cannot parse metaphor as a literary construction, and then it made people very mad, guys, because the specter of white supremacy hunts us all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was I didn't think it was a bad analogy. As the point being made there is not like, gee, these people have the same politics as David Duke or Richard Spencer, which, to be clear, that's why it's an analogy or a metaphor, not actually just a literal comparison.
There's no education anymore. It's just here's this, a million genders and why gay people are better than you.
And coding.
Yeah, and
you get to use your school vouchers on a coding boot camp and gender re-education camp or something. That's fine. But I mean, the idea of sort of the least bad alternative and the like that voting strategy. I'm a big fan now of the idea that like if you're animated by the idea of harm reduction of the inevitable Trump administration, then down ballot races are where it's at. Like that's and unfortunately I can't really get excited about very many of them. Nancy Pelosi being primaried in my district is exciting for me.
Yeah.
And that will be the thing that gets me to fill out a ballot at all.
Mm-hmm.
I've not decided whether I just sort of leave the presidential race blank or vote for a third party. It doesn't really matter. I'm in California. But yeah, no, like cool. I will engage in sort of electoralism to the extent that I'll go vote in a down ballot race, which involves replacing somebody who will sort of write blank checks for the Trump administration with maybe somebody who might have some other program that's a little more compatible with,
Yeah.
I don't know, human beings staying alive, or
What just irritates me is, like, clearly what we've learned is it's not tangible to utilize the Democratic Party to enact even like a social democrat candidate. Like, I don't know, Bernie.
No, even the most mild, like neoliberal compatible reforms are not possible with the Democratic Party. It's hard line. Like it's hardline neoliberal. It's like if it's not a market, then we just don't want to hear about it.
Yeah. My issue is with the few like left wing parties, whatever that means, they just all put their stakes into the presidency or like have one candidate running in like part of the country, and it's completely useless in actual any change. It's like they don't get me excited. Like there's a socialist alternative, which I just learned are horrible on foreign policy because they're Trotskyist. And I'm not gonna get into that. I don't really get. Like I think
you're racist against Trots.
I think in a local elections it matters way less because they're just focused on like state policy. But like I wouldn't vote for someone who's gonna like just shit on every potential left-wing government and be like, we need to revolutionize against it. And then you have the Green Party, which is just like social democracy, and it's like Jill Stein the last fucking decade, because they stopped running after the Bush win where the Greens swept.
Nader.
But there was a bunch of like local and like state elections that the Greens did really well in, and nothing came of it, and they just kind of stopped doing it. Maybe they fell apart. I have no idea. And then
if the project is ballot access, then like that'd be cool, but that's not what they work on. They run fucking like meme candidates for president.
And then you have like what's like the Party for Social or like PSL, which like it's fine. I have issues with our group like this because we're all people and imperfect.
They feel
but
better intentioned at least.
They have started running some local candidates in California, which is like I think it's a good start. I think you need to start creating a working class party that's focused on winning local elections, and then build up from there. Because I think local elections have probably a much easier entry point because it's smaller communities then.
So if I was to try and like, I don't know, divine some ideal reality where you come back from this and you're still trying to do electoralism as your primary strategy, it would be like a new party that peels off some of the like populist Democrats maybe, and is called like the American
Workers
Labor Party, or the American Workers and Racism Party. And like run an incredibly boring party. The problem I have with PSL is that they're I think their politics are quite good and pure. Yeah. The problem is that it's packaged up and messaged to a like a very kind of like radical, like activist audience.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's like there's a lot of sort of like hot button issues in there. They don't go do the boring shit. Do the be incredibly boring and pedestrian, except on labor rights. Like on labor, like anything affecting labor or workers, like just do that.
Like anything beyond economics, just shut the fuck up about. Because like it doesn't like.
Well, just co-opt the Democrats' positions on it, and that's fine. Like because it doesn't matter. Like on social issues, the Democrats are like sitting somewhere, slightly, within the consensus of what's acceptable as a social issue. So don't do anything that Nancy Pelosi wouldn't do on anything that's not economic for now, and then run ultra left on economics, and that's you're done.
The issue with like the economic social divide is it views issues as either economic or social, when so much of the social divisions and like issues are based in economics. And when you just have a socialist platform, it already covers everyone. You don't need to like mention a million different groups and then say working people, because like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, like
you're not fighting here for rich gay people or like women or I don't know, black people, like anyone. Like rich people are not the group you're supposed to be fighting for. You're supposed to be fighting for poor, like working people.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying is actually just abdicate the question of being responsible for kind of formulating positions on social issues that are already like there's a total framing question about whether these are real social issues or whether they're actually just like the economic harms that we would expect. But I'm saying sidestep that entire question. I'm saying don't like just plagiarize the Democrats' positions. On anything, like to the extent that some shithead MSNBC reporter is going to ask you like, do you support reparations? And your answer to that is whatever the fuck Nancy Pelosi said last week.
Yeah.
And if you say like, what do you think about trans bathroom bans in North Carolina? You just rip off, I don't know, whatever like Gavin Newsom was saying last week or something, like, or Chuck Schumer or somebody.
Yeah.
Like just like that's your answer. And you just play like, hello, we're incredibly boring and serious. No, not a white person dreadlock in sight.
You can't look like a weird like like a radical like activist type. You need to look like regular people in like a regular like suit or like pantsuit or like dress or whatever.
Yeah, we're a pantsuit nation. And don't fall into the Rose Caucus trap either of being like any good cause is worth highlighting as an issue.
No,
where you're like, so nothing about fucking privatizing golf courses, people. That's not on the agenda. Sorry.
Certain things I think should be just kind of incorporated within the broader economic policies. Like no green, like this isn't to be really controversial. No Green New Deal talk. Just talk about like energy, talk about water, talk about housing, and then you can mention like, oh, we're gonna make sure it's like eco-friendly, but like it's the main thing is making it affordable. Because this whole thing is very alienating, and it clearly doesn't work because like social democracies like France and shit are seeing issues now, and I'm like, that's not gonna get anyone excited here when they're like, oh, how am I gonna pay for all my stuff when my like heat bill goes up because you changed it and aren't investing in like proper funding to improve it.
Well, and being taking the question of economics seriously, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like the Democrats are not serious about economics. The fucking DSA are not serious about economics, right?
No.
So the thing is, engage sincerely with the question that the electorate is primed to ask the question, gee, that sounds really expensive. Like, that sounds nice, but that sounds way too expensive. We can't afford that, right? Because you're taught with this sort of, people are inculcated with a kind of austerity mindset.
Yeah.
So then you have to have a very serious, like, well, no, actually, this is excellent for the economy. Like, buy into the fucking narrative. Like take and internalize the entire fucking dumb framing, and you can think the framing is dumb, and it is. But if you want like electoral, you have to take some power first.
Yeah.
And then you get to be like, abolish the CIA and privatize golf courses or whatever the fuck. Like, then, like, cool. Like, all that stuff can come, but you have to find a way to actually connect with a huge broad base first. And clearly the fucking Democratic Party is not the institution for that, because they're just congenitally incapable of it. Whatever gains you made as a Democratic candidate, you'll be kneecapped by Nancy Pelosi coming in behind you and being like, well, actually, a stimulus check of $1,200 is very expensive. It's like, no, fuck it. Say, oh, they're doing $1,200 stimulus checks. We're going to do, $12,000 stimulus checks. Yeah. And then have a very serious economic argument about like, well, we believe the economic impact of, additional revenue will be this. And we think actually over a 5-year term, this will pay off and, net negative. Like, great. Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Like, cool. Because you're a serious person then. You're a serious person engaging seriously in what the entire media apparatus has trained everyone to believe is what it means to be a serious politician, as opposed to a fucking joke meme candidate with a fucking rose emoji in your bio.
Yeah, no, it's like, if you look at, especially for like the presidential winners, the last 2 times, they all did similar like standpoints. They didn't follow through with any of them, but it's like, oh, let's stop spending money and meddling abroad, which people don't like. People don't like intervention. Even Donald Trump early on was like, we weren't sure on like his healthcare thing, because back in the day he was like, oh, he had a similar thing to like the Clintons, where it's like, oh, universal whatever healthcare. Obama even offered the public option. Like, even his offering a public option was like considered popular among most of society.
Yeah.
Like, people don't want to be interfering with the rest of the world, but most Democrats are too stupid to recognize the issues of like people don't like free trade agreements and they don't like flooding the economy of like the migrants from like countries we destroy and shit like that. And it's like
Yeah, you don't need to be.
it's not that hard.
You don't need to do radicalism, because the problem is you're talking to an audience that is just vanishingly small. You're talking to a kind of like leftoid, like, I don't know, it's a PMC fucking set, right?
Yeah.
Who are the people who are like, gee, I'm so glad that I get to vote for a candidate who has a really strong position on, I don't fucking know, like, prisoner wages or some shit. Like, you're like, that's cool, that's an important issue, but like, it's just not the thing that's going to animate a large enough base. It has to be like really stick to the bread and butter.
Yeah. I mean,
Chicken in every pot,
you would have lots of other
Land.
opinions, but save them for when you win. Like,
right. Take power.
especially if they're like high office things, then you can utilize them to push in people into the different departments who are going to control a lot of these policies. Like,
Sure. Yeah. Do everything. Like, if you take any power, then start doing shit. That's great.
also, I'm so sick of everyone being like, oh, well, you must vote for the blue party because of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is awful. Like, I think it was like Du Bois, or who was it that ran for president and got
Eugene
prison?
Debs.
Eugene Debs. Sorry, I'm just mixing up names.
All right.
He called the Supreme Court like a pro-capitalist regime. Like, it's not.
Yeah. No,
It's never going to be for you. The Constitution itself is not for working people. So I'm like, I'm not going to vote for someone because like I don't give a fuck about RBG or like any of these people because they're not working class candidates. Like, they may have some cultural issues that I agree with, like abortion or whatever. But it's like, I'm not going to sacrifice the workers for a cause like that.
Well, think about Obama put forward an incredibly weak compromise candidate in the form of Merrick Garland,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't manage to get them through.
Yeah.
So, like, why do you believe that Biden will be able to make a Supreme Court appointment?
I saw
What
Biden.
makes you think that could happen?
Biden apparently voted for Scalia.
Of course he did. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Why do you
basically
think,
railroaded through Clarence Thomas as well.
like, why do you think Biden of all people is going to give us like anything beyond like what would be considered like a John McCain-esque Republican?
Yeah, I mean, it to the extent that like you're talking about an institution that has to become irrelevant at some point, and but even just from a purely sort of proceduralism ground, what is it that makes you think you will get an appointment out of Biden?
Yeah.
Like the Republicans were willing to block that appointment for, was it 8 months?
He was very long.
Yeah, six or 8 months. I don't remember exactly how long. And that was a candidate that was already sort of an olive branch because Obama, like, his negotiation strategy is start halfway to your opponent's position and then negotiate further from there. And it just didn't buy him anything, right? He didn't get that appointment through. So like if he'd started out with some like screaming pussy hat wearing blue hair butch lesbian,
Mm-hmm.
and then negotiated his way to Merrick Garland, maybe it would be a different conversation.
Yeah.
But like, fucking Democrats, man, they can't do anything except negotiate against themselves first, and then be like, we're doing pragmatism. We lost everything, but we're doing pragmatism.
Well, so it's complete bullshit that these people keep being like, oh, we're the party for democracy and whatever. It's like the Supreme Court is not Democratic, it's not elected, and they basically just interpret the law however they want. Because we clearly have seen it varies on whoever's in. Like
Totally, it's
FDR
partisan.
changed the people so he could get things that were being rejected because it doesn't matter. It's
Well,
all,
he threatened to stack the court.
what I meant.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you really care about the issues you think are going to get removed, which I don't think are going to happen, at least not in the 4 years upcoming, like gay marriage or abortion, stop being so fucking lazy and go out there and push for like your legislators to actually pass these like laws. Like, what are you doing?
Go do a gay marriage. Go do them.
Like, what are you doing? You're seen so lazy and utilizing an undemocratic institution to like protect some sacred values when it's like
Our precious norms, Sam.
It's,
What about our precious norms?
It's so stupid.
It is. It's a bourgeois institution, and therefore you should be deeply skeptical about its value anyway. And the point being that even the supposed heroes on it, this is the problem, is everyone gets very excited about essentially a court case from 1973, this Roe v. Wade,
Yeah.
and forgets that like there's just been very little expansion of anything outside of like some hot button issues that the Supreme Court lands on about 10 years later. So gay marriage, right? 2005, that became a sort of an actual political project in terms of, I guess, Massachusetts Supreme Court legalized gay marriage. And then it was 2015 before the Supreme Court ruled on gay marriage.
Yeah.
10 full years. What a wonderful bastion of rights. Okay, so there you got that. And then if you look at any labor cases, as in like unionization, right to work, unfair dismissal, fucking public sector unions, right? They're just like that court, all these supposedly, quote unquote, the liberal justices, right?
Mm-hmm.
They all vote the same. These are mostly unanimous cases.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know, where do you think this partisan divide is among like kind of the very religious versus the kind of moderately like liberal Christianity? They could just as well be divided as a theological debate between the, all of the justices are people of faith, and they divide along lines of like, I don't know, sort of catechism or of theology.
Yeah.
It's a better analytical tool for analyzing the Supreme Court.
Yeah, just
Like, are you Catholic? Are you a sort of liberal Protestant or something?
it's crap. It's all
Yeah. So anyway, if you want to get into theological debates, just go to the Vatican or something. It's much more exciting. Like, go find some Jesuits to debate with, because that's what you're doing with the Supreme Court. It's just not an institution that will ever be reformable. It must be sidestepped, not even abolished. It just actually has to become irrelevant.
totally.
Either by a sort of the FDR trick was the right one, right? Of essentially threatening to kind of make it useless as an institution.
Yeah.
Yeah, threatening to violate the norm sufficiently that for various other reasons he could kind of get some, get a bit of a compromise with labor in place.
Mm-hmm.
But no, you have to do much better than that even.
Yeah. Should we go to the next topic?
Sure.
Cool. Well, speaking of countries that are sick and fucking tired of neoliberalism, someone sent me a tweet, 'cause I've been tweeting a lot about the EU and how I hate it, which isn't very popular, I realize, to a lot of the left, because they think it's like some leftist.
But our precious norms.
But it's horrible. Let me find a picture, because someone sent it to me. So, Italy basically changed 20 points in if there was a European Union referendum to leave. 51% of Italy now says they would leave, or it would remain in the EU, and 49% say they would leave. And that's since November 2018. So it's changed 20 points down for remain and 20 points up for leave, which makes me kind of, well, for one, I'm like, oh, I'm calling this shit, because like they happened after, like, I was like, oh, a bunch of countries are gonna leave after the fucking coronavirus. You're right, guys. We're still mentioning coronavirus.
Oh, that wasn't. We didn't get the one no Rona episode. We're back to Rona zone.
Yeah.
Rona rage again.
And the reason it's relevant is, I don't think people really realized, is after the 2008 crisis, especially in Europe, the solution was the EU to tell countries like Italy and Greece and stuff to cut expenditures. And as a result, Italy...
But not just any expenditure. It was always very specific. It's pensions, healthcare, and like what they regard as economic inefficiency, which is to say, like union contracts. Yeah.
And Italy, which once was the second highest rated healthcare system in the world, cut a shit ton of hospitals. They shut them down and fired a bunch of people to sit with this. As a result, you see one of the issues. I don't think the liberal media is clearly not mentioning this because they don't want to mention, oh, the EU's bad. But EU's like devastated countries, and we see the conflicts happening, whether it's in Sweden or it's in France or it's in Italy or Greece. Like none of them are doing well under
Yeah.
this if you're a working class person.
Well, I mean, the question is if Italy leaves the EU, then who will commandeer their supplies of ventilators and personal protective equipment? Yeah, I will sort of fully front to the fact that I in my sort of early 2000s anti-war phase, one of the things that was always said about the EU was like, yeah, it has a bunch of problems, right? It's kind of a horrible institution in its own way, but it's prevented a land war in Europe.
Yeah.
Because that was sort of like, if you think about some of the vision behind like the EEC, the European Economic Community that preceded it, and all these ideas, it was like, okay, that binding these countries together in these, completely inextricable kind of bonds of trade will stop them going to war again. No more land wars in Europe. However, it's not clear that it would actually hold up to that challenge.
No, and right now you see countries stealing from each other.
Right. This is shit people go to war over.
It's actually reinforcing a system that requires countries to be in a competitive nature in a so-called like even platform, but it's not true. Countries like Germany and shit have far more political power, and because a lot of the banks are based there, than like places like Greece or Serbia or like Italy, and they're clearly getting fed up with it. And I think more countries will try to leave after this thing. And
yeah, I mean, the question being, if you are, if you have to imagine that some of the kind of neoliberal responses to coronavirus will inspire populist right-wing movements in various countries, like there's just going to be reaction.
yeah,
Of course there will, right? Like an insufficient government response from a sort of ostensibly center-left government or whatever will result in reaction.
totally.
And then, throw in a little bit of xenophobia, just declining status and declining material conditions for everyone. You're going to get a bunch of right-wing reaction. Now throw in some like, oh, Germany is just stealing hundreds of thousands of
Testing
medical
kits,
medical kits and like medical, millions of dollars worth of testing equipment destined for Italy because they want it for themselves. Tell me that won't inspire another fucking land war in Europe, and what will the EU be good for?
Yeah. Well, I also think Italy will be I'm predicting this. I think Italy will be the next country to leave because we already see it. There's a separation in consensus with the EU. Like with Venezuela, Italy was like one of the few countries in Western Europe that did not agree that Juan Guaido was the rightful president. He thought Maduro was. And that clearly shows, because the whole point is like to have consensus, and that's no longer being the case. Italy already has a strong like separation movement, and it just skyrocketed after like a crisis happened.
Well, yeah, and the sort of northern Italian separatist movements will get even more rowdy, and
Yeah.
it's our hot Latinate blood that causes us to be incapable of just playing nicely with others.
Well, I also think the only reason we'll see right-wing parties, primarily populist parties, emerge in Europe is if there is no left populist party that's also anti-EU responding. I mean, we saw the same thing with the UK when the Labour Party dropped that kind of like...
Oh God, yeah, tying the fortunes of Corbyn to the fortunes of like Remain.
Yeah.
Like, you morons.
Like, you need to have a leftist cause that's also like, we don't like the EU, because the EU is not a leftist organization. It's a neoliberal institution, and it's horrible if you care about like workers' rights.
Yeah, I mean, the problem would be to look at, and this has been the liberal trick, right, is to look at a kind of hot button issue. In the UK, right, it was always Eastern European countries joining the EU, and then the resultant mass immigration.
Yeah.
From places like Poland initially, Romania later, the Balkans, all coming on stream.
Yeah.
Turkey was always the stalking horse, right? The idea that like, well, if Turkey joins the EU, it'll be all over.
Yeah.
it would be to not take those concerns seriously. It's not saying you have to agree with the internal logic of it and the fact that it often comes packaged with a bunch of like pretty gross, racist and xenophobic rhetoric, but you can't say to a kind of a worker who is barely getting by outside of a major city in the UK and then say, wow, gee, you're just racist.
Yeah, well,
which is the entire reaction.
That's the lie. I think Ashley Frawley's made this point, and so have many like other Marxists in Europe, is this idea of, oh, they all voted to remain because they're anti-immigrant. It's like most working people don't give a fuck. They just want to make sure they have job security and like security. And right now, they have one side saying, oh, we should let more people in like Germany, let millions of more people who Turkey floods in by invading other countries, and it'll be fine. You have the right wing like, we actually don't want to have more people come in because it's bad for our citizens. It's like, who do you think they're going to choose?
Right, and there has to be a strong left wing version of this message, which is simply saying, no, we reject whatever small minded bigotry you are employing to express your discontent with the situation, but we take sincerely the idea that you wouldn't want 100,000 French people a day turning up either, right? And like, and that's the simple fact is, right, there's not 100,000 French people turning up in Britain, say, every day.
Yeah.
If there were, I guarantee you that there'd be a bunch of really gross anti-French rhetoric, and it would sound very bigoted and horrible, and it would be reprehensible on its face. But the concern that animates somebody to say, to resort to essentially a pretty kind of base instinct around like, fuck, this, like these people writ large are making my life worse. They're making my life more dangerous to live. And my ability to simply survive is actually being compromised by this. Like, you cannot just turn that off. You can't just say, well, you used the wrong words to say it, and therefore you're just a racist, you're a deplorable, whatever. It's not that simple. You have to take the line of like, okay, we're going to sort of ignore the tone of voice in which you said it and hear the actual substance of what you're saying. And so, if Italians start going, fucking Germans, you'd be, I would say, woe betide to anybody who ignores that cry for saying, no, the Germans are our allies and they're a clean and fastidious people.
Like, it's not that, like, exactly, like Germany to a lot of Europe is like the face of like the EU. So if, like, there's not right now a lot.
Well, the EU's economic policy is German economic policy. There's just no.
That's what I mean.
Like, there's no daylight between the two.
No, exactly what I mean. Like, it's like the face of it. And your point on like, oh, if like a bunch of French people or whatever flooded like Italy or Great Britain or wherever, there'd be the sentiment, and that's true because like all the sentiments you see against groups are groups that have came in for numerous different reasons, primarily economic destruction and like imperialism, but like you see anti-Arab sentiments from the Middle East, which the EU's been quite complicit with interfering with. You see it.
It's okay. They're French manufactured jets used to go and bomb Syria, so it's fine.
You see a high degree of like Romani and like Eastern European anti-sentiment because they're viewed as like not primitive people. Like they're travelers. They're not.
Yeah, they're backwards. They don't build. They don't do Western civilization properly.
Yeah. Or it's African people, which like if you look at why they're coming
savages.
Here, it's because you just stabilized Libya, which overthrew a bunch of like.
Well, and 100 years of European colonialism in Africa before that, certainly.
Yeah, but I mean it spread over into like things like Mauritania and shit like that just boosted Boko Haram and like like no one's expected to be like, oh, they should just stay there. Like no one's gonna. Makes people want to leave and be safe, like especially if they have families.
Right. And the point being, you can share the concern for the well-being of those people, right? I mean, you can be, and I don't mean those people. I mean the people who are endangered by any conflict, famine, disaster, disease, or simply just economic deprivation. The problem being, you are dependent on a base of power in order to do anything to affect that change. And if that base of power, the place from which you derive any, agency to act politically is telling you like, I see what's going on here, and I don't like French people.
Yeah.
Well, what you should be hearing is not, not your no. Well, I'm actually the French actually contribute enormously to the economy. You're like, no, wrong response. You have to say, no, the French are fine, but I hear you, and clearly, yeah, you can't have something like mass immigration, nor can you have a complete ceding of what is effectively national sovereignty, if national sovereignty is the proxy by which people measure like how precarious am I, how dangerous is my, who am I competing with just in order to stay alive under capitalism? And if you're like, well, my manufacturing jobs are disappearing to cheaper parts of the EU, which they have for years and years,
going
right?
Like Poland and like Romania,
it all moves east.
Ukraine, possibly.
Right. So suddenly, if you then say, well, all the jobs that were there are gone, and now a huge number of economic migrants are turning up from newly admitted countries to the EU, you just can't ignore that. It's gonna fuck you up, and you're gonna end up with like, Boris Johnson as prime minister, or you're gonna end with like Nigel Farage getting a lot of electoral currency, or Marine Le Pen, or whatever. Like, this is because they actually speak to that issue and they say it in the wrong tone of voice.
Yeah, exactly.
They respond to the tone of voice in which it was said, still not really addressing the economic issues, but they at least provides it a lip service to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like that's the issue with, I think, especially in American politics, is this idea of being against open borders means you're the same as, I don't know, a Trump or a ban or something on immigration policy. Like, oh, the camps are fine and whatever. It's like, no, like I don't want the government to waste its time locking people up and focusing on like poor, destitute refugees. The focus should be on the capitalists and the foreign policy that's making this the reality.
Right. People did this. We know their names.
Like, I'm not gonna why would you lock up children or like women or men? I don't care. Like, who are leaving horrible situations. Like, that's what rational people do. The real thing to focus on is the root cause, and they're not changing that. Instead, it's like making it morally virtuous to accept people and never actually wonder why are they actually leaving their homeland where they have communities and cultural ties and like ties to the region. It's like no one wants to leave. Like, I've talked to lots of people like who are from the diaspora of like the Levant, like Syria and Lebanon, and they're like, oh, I wish I could go back because like that's where their families and stuff are. And it's like,
sure, there's
but they had to leave
nice,
because like there's ISIS and shit like that. Like, no one wants to leave.
Yeah, or I would love to go back to New Zealand, except there's a New Zealand Labour Party there. Changing tacks a little bit. The gays, they're terrible.
Yeah, I sent you this horrible.
Yeah, Sam sent me a horrible article, and I should
wasn't that
clarify.
bad.
It's not horrible. It's kind of horrible because they're reporting. And this is so the title of the article is let me find it here. Sorry.
The gay community's obsession with status and looks has huge mental health cost.
Right, and it's in Them magazine or something.
Yeah, dem.us. So never heard of it before. I saw it on Facebook and I was like,
It has a nice illustrated graphic of a circuit party.
They're all muscular too. Where's the twink representation?
Yeah, I do not feel any representation here.
But no, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Oh well, yeah. So the article is reporting on a study done at Yale University by John Pachenkis, the associate professor of public health and director of the LGBTQ mental health initiative at Yale University. And what they basically did is they did a study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology over 5 years, which represents samples of participants from across the U.S. and was trying to look at community stressors among gay and bisexual men. The idea being that sort of things like discrimination and stigma and sort of extra community ideas have been studied very well, but like, what is the intra-community, like, what do those stressors look like? Basically, gay men being bitches to each other and things like that.
Yeah.
And what is the effect on mental and physical health? Cool. Totally great thing to study. And to be clear, I haven't read the original study.
No, I haven't either.
However, this fucking article sucks balls.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I agree with a lot of the issues they point out, but the causation or the solution is just complete liberal trash. So
Yeah.
well,
yeah, we can maybe cover what the at a high level what the article was saying, and it's saying. So it's done in interview format, and the interviewer asked, "What were the major pressures you found affecting the mental health of gay and bisexual men?" And they found 4 types of stressors. One stress is perceiving the gay community to be overly focused on sex at the expense of long-term relationships or friendships. So gays are sluts. Second is the gay community is overly focused on status-related concerns, things like masculinity, attractiveness, and wealth. The third was related to perceptions that the gay community is overly competitive, that it upholds a kind of shade culture and general social competition. The fourth was that the gay community is exclusionary of diversity, including racial, ethnic diversity, and age diversity, and discriminatory towards gay men with HIV. And those stressors are associated with depression and anxiety, basically. So this was a statistically significant finding.
Yeah.
They found there was a five-year study and a lot of like self-evaluations and things like that. And like, cool. So what do you think about those 4 stressors? Do you think that sounds right?
I think they definitely are huge contributors. I mean, we've talked about a lot of these things throughout. For example, the fixation on sex is like pinnacle to relations of other gays. It's why I don't think things like Grindr or Tinder are actually good for people, because they view people as commodities. They view them as a market, and it makes sex the key point of a relationship versus an actual like genuine relationship or even friendship. Like I remember when I moved from Wisconsin to the Bay Area, for like the first month or two, I was like, does anyone actually want to be my friend, or they just want to have sex with me? Which was never an issue before, because I always had either straight friends or like Midwest gay friends where that wasn't the objective. It was just like, oh, you happen to be gay, but we're not like all fucking each other. And that was clearly like detrimental, I think, because like, oh, I've been here this long and no one wants my friend. They just want to all sleep with me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
horrible.
Like you would not be you would be in good company if you sort of figured out that all your friends are people you're sort of related to by 1 or 2 degrees of sex.
Well, it's even worse here because all our friends, like at least almost every single one of my friends are gay, because it's a larger community, but you don't really move beyond it, and it's like, oh, now everyone just wants to have sex, and that's all it's focused on, and that's not good for your mental health, because you never know what's genuine or real. And I know we have a lot of friends who are like, clearly benefited from deleting things like Grindr or like Tinder, because like they made, for one, a dating market that once was based on like similar values. Like, remember I was my friend, we signed up his mom for like eHarmony, and like it asks you questions like, oh, like what are your hobbies, like what are your interests, like what are you looking for. So
what are you into?
So it wasn't based in like your appearance, it was based on like similar answers.
What's your tribe?
And now the first thing you see is, oh, how attractive are they in their very first picture, and will I just not talk to them? Because
how many Instagram followers do you have? That's the important
exactly
thing.
And that's not good for mental health.
Yeah, so I did think this work, sort of to the extent that I will give this article credit, because they did ask the question, what were your hesitations about how this research might be perceived in the wrong light?
Mm-hmm.
And it's very much for an audience where they're saying that the lead researcher on this was saying, I knew that any research that shows stigma or heterosexism is not the sole cause of gay and bisexual men's poor mental health could be potentially used to somehow return to this old historical argument that somehow gay and bisexual men are inherently pathological, which they are. And then it moves on to a sort of causation argument, and this is where I part ways with it.
What do you part ways with?
Well, so it's funny. When you sent me this article, I like something started ringing in my head, and this is going to sound pretentious as shit. But I actually went and looked up an old, Horkheimer and Adorno wrote a book I think in the 60s. They were the main topic of discussion is around alienation.
Yeah.
And one of the sort of things missing from all of this was a discussion of like why has it gone so much worse?
Yeah.
And the idea that gay men are just bitches, which like yes, true, but it's sort of not. That's a
reductionist take.
Yeah, it's reductionist, and it's lacking in a sort of an actual causation argument that I find persuasive.
Mm-hmm.
And here's my hot take.
Okay, give me the hot take.
Scorching hot take, not really well reasoned out, but like I don't know. So if you sort of think about like our social relations being very governed by our relation to power, say, and this is the sort of classic Adorno alienation stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then you would sort of want to know, well, what's changed about gay men's relation to power in the last, I don't know, say 10 or 20 years. And if there was no sort of like resort to mass media, if you didn't, if quote unquote representation wasn't available to us, it's not like you could just sort of switch on the TV and see 100 gays being gays.
Yeah.
Then you might be forced to relate to other humans as a sort of you could not substitute that sort of consumption, or a reflection back of your sort of your self perception reflected back to you as a consumer product. Then you might be forced to resort to other means of actual like social relations, right?
Yeah.
So I would claim that greater social acceptance is basically mean that like gay men's identity has been fully commodified. We were not full members of the the paid up consumerist class because we were sort of outsiders and sat at the margins.
Yeah.
Now we're in there. We're good. We're fully accepted. So now we're full participants in like what it means to be fully alienated, as like your own sense of alienation becomes a sort of product that can be sold back to you, furthering that alienation. And I think it's just a flywheel of that.
So I'm gonna kind of disagree with you. So
How dare you?
So I think the reason the heightening of I believe alienation is the causation of so much of this, whether it's racial distinctions or feeling like you're not sufficient in like looks or body type or masculinity. But I think the true reason is because the gay community is a community that does not separate by class. It separates by sexuality. So gay community allows people of multiple economic groups that normally would never associate, because most economic, like straight people, never move beyond their economic group because they're usually located in like my neighborhood or who I work with. But gays don't do that. They can party with billionaires and millionaires and like the poorest of the poor because it doesn't really matter. But you start comparing yourselves with other people, and then you see the diversions with like, oh, who's has the best outfits and who's looking the best. And that's where the racial component also ties in, because who's often poor is like often like racial groups or like people not from high income areas. So it's like a good example is the Bay Area. In San Francisco, most of the gays are Asian and white because they have a higher income net. If you go to the East Bay, it's where mostly of the lesbians and like Latino and Black gay men live, because they can't afford to live in a city because they work in precarity industries. So you have a distinction of class, but the community's tied in without a class analysis or class restrictions, and that's why you have a comparison between different people and feeling insignificant.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd buy that for sure. I mean, there's a sort of where are we? So certainly the study did cover some differences in age, income, education, race, and ethnicity.
Yeah.
Which, like, great, good, doing good research. As we love social science.
But the issue is income is not a replacement for class analysis.
Right. Yeah, to simply do, I mean, coarse-grained income analysis is, I think, always worth examining, but it doesn't tell you about your relationship to capital.
Exactly.
Small business owners in San Francisco, for example, lots of small business owner gays. They're lovely, but their politics are exactly that you expect from people who own, rely on owning things. Landlords, gay landlords. There's a lot of them in San Francisco.
Yeah. I've had sex with them. them.
Ooh,
It's okay, one's in jail.
That's counter-revolutionary. Guillotine.
I didn't know better.
Penis guillotine.
I was still a libertarian.
You were still libertarian. Oh, you were just, there was just a free market of sexual ideals.
Yeah, and I was very unhappy, so.
So at the end, there was some recommendations about like, what is to be done.
Yeah.
In the style of all good political polemics, it asks the question, and I think there's actually some value in here. So I think one of the least frequently endorsed items on our surveys was that gay men aren't good friends to each other, which really suggests that relying on strengthening friendships in the face of some of these more stressful aspects of the gay community would be a sure route to protect against this type of stress. I agree with that, right? I mean, like, yeah. I think we've talked previously about like the idea of chosen family, whether they're juggalos or homos or whatever. I think this is all very important, and the straights can learn a lot about this too. I think that like you can form these kind of very tight familial style bonds outside of biological family, and they're really worthwhile. They're very nourishing. I would say they're important to me. Like and then it talks a little bit about moving gay community spaces moving online, things like Grindr, and how it like how horrible that is.
Told you.
Yeah. And that so things like diverse communities and diverse friendships might transcend artificial boundaries that exist in the heterosexual cisgender world. And that these online spaces make it harder to do that because people can self-segregate, right? They can sort of reject people, and they can, catalog shop. We've certainly talked about that before.
Yeah.
And so it would be preserving brick and mortar spaces where people can continue to congregate in diverse, open ways. I don't think gay bars are necessarily much better than that, but it might help a little bit, right? Some exposure to people who are at least a little different.
Well, I think for a long period of time, a gay space that allowed people who weren't just restricting by like sexual like attractiveness was organization for greater liberation, and that was an area where people spent time was with all people working to fight for improvements in their situations. Like, but we don't really have that anymore because a lot of our demands have been met, except for like the material ones, which now we not us, but like
now that would segregate by class.
But the gay industrial complex have completely ignored, and they just won't talk about it because they've actually benefit from gay working class people more associating with gay bourgeois people than like other straight working class people.
Totally. And the other interesting thing they point out here is where are we? One of the things that's been often underutilized in the gay community is intergenerational mentorship, and it works both ways. We know that LGBTQ plus older adults are more likely to be living alone, and that's a risk factor for depression. And we know that LGBTQ plus young people are in most cases not born into families that are also LGBTQ plus. Holy shit, that's a mouthful. I cannot do this.
LGBTQPAA.
So I'm going to say faggots. So they don't inherit a sense of community, norms, or history from their parents. A perfect way to learn it would be fresh from the elders in our community. At the same time, elders in our community would probably benefit from contact with younger generations. There's historically been a lot of barriers to that. That tracks with my experience. I think I've told the story about living in Denmark, right, where just a more egalitarian society in general, because it's sort of big kit social democracy, and then longer history of gay, sort of LGBTQIA plus acceptance means that the sort of intergenerational relationships were less charged.
Yeah.
It was less like you're a sugar daddy and a twink or whatever, or less of like, you could generally, I feel like in a way that I've never quite managed here.
No, I agree.
You could form friendships or at least bonds of camaraderie well outside your age group.
Yeah. I think one of the issues is for so much of the older gay generation, I feel like they're just kind of left alone. Like most of the old generation is quite lonely and sad. Like they're not tied into community ever because they're not relevant to capital. And
the sexual market.
But also the sexual market, but also for their generation, like lots of people in the generation died from like HIV and AIDS, And also, there was no ability to formulate a legal family structure or adopt. There was no like IVF or like anything like that. Um, so I think they just kind of passed the marker where they felt it was possible to have things which, personally, I think are important for any relationship, whether it's gay, lesbian, straight, is like having a family, having something to
Yeah,
like
whatever that kind of
care.
means, right? But like
So you can only
some greater purpose.
you can only accelerate your career so much, but you need to accelerate your um
your
relationship
genes.
your relationship with other people. You need to have something to be like proud of. Like old people when they retire, their thing is, oh, my family to take care of. Like these people
your
don't
garden,
have
your
they don't
family,
have that. Like
your
you're
stamp
alone.
collection.
You don't have children to like
your tweets. Me and my tweets are gonna be very happy in my dotage.
And I know it's like people think that's like, oh, it's so trad to be like, oh, let's get gays to have like families and blah blah blah, 'cause that's heteronormative. Like, there's nothing wrong with having that, and that's often most people want to have families,
Yeah.
and it makes them happy.
Well, and we can reinterrogate the structures that we use for it, right? I mean, I would say things like very radically non-traditional family structures and I don't know, fun poly structures or whatever. Like, cool, whatever works for you. But the idea it is some investment outside yourself, right? Which is like not just falling into a sort of like an existential void, which is sort of only like it's narcissistic, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of solipsistic because it's like, well, I will never be anything more than this individual unit that I am. It's not easy to then interact with those people, right? How do you form the sort of the bonds of family with people who are so invested in sort of being an island unto themselves?
Well, that's the thing I agree with. Like we don't need to have a strict monogamous like set of family structure. Like you can have like polyamorous whatever, and like you don't need to have children, but like a lot of the older generation who feels alienated not just from like the gay community, but like the broader community, were often like removed from like or kicked off from their families. They never had a connection with like their siblings, children, which like nowadays like we can be like gunkles. We can just be like, oh, I'm gonna spoil you because I have like more resources and not taking care of children, and like have a connection with like someone younger who I can like give my knowledge and stuff to.
Right. Feel relevant, feel important.
Yeah.
It's actually like, and not important in a self-important way, important in a way of like, hey, I can help to raise another generation. I can continue my values and inspire and teach and and that's all important. And so I don't know, as a reach out to find some older gay friends. Honestly, if you're a young homo, it's worth doing. I do have older gay friends.
Yeah.
Not many in San Francisco, sadly, because it's a tough place for it because it I feel like it's so tied up with sexual politics.
I have a lot of lesbian great aunts, so
perfect.
But they're all single and don't. Actually, no, one has children. Actually, no, two have children. One went to a gay bar. One went to a straight bar because back in the day there was no one for stuff, and she wanted children, but like she didn't want to have like marriage or like whatever. So she went to a straight bar, and she's a lesbian, and she found a man she thought was attractive genetically wise, and was like hooked up with him as a lesbian to get knocked up, and that's how she had her children. Was finding attractive men in bars, having sex with them, getting pregnant, never letting them know, and then having their children. Like that's how you do it. Like
good work. I mean, well, also,
she knew what she wanted.
If you're lesbians and can procreate, ask your gay friends for sperm donations. I bet more of them are game than you'd expect. Actually, I know quite a few gay men who are in odd familial structures with lesbians who have had children and like they're semi-involved in their children's lives and like good on them.
Yeah,
that's nice.
In the sperm industry, lesbians actually prefer statistically gay donors, the straight donors. I don't know why. I'm assuming it's like because they're also gay, but like
less likely to be brutish straight men. I mean, straight men are the worst.
But I mean, maybe it's like also like these people probably aren't procreating, so it's like, oh,
undervalued commodity on the market of genetic ideas.
Yeah, I mean the article was fine. I think you need to incorporate the class analysis because we need to stop viewing like like bosses and shit as part of the community or like as at least allies in a cause because it's not helping anyone.
Yeah,
And
corporate HR departments are not allies. They just cannot be.
no,
And yet we actually have recentered, to borrow a term, we've recentered the voices of corporate HR departments to basically define what it means to have a healthy community and have a community that relates to like where individuals in that community can relate to others in a way that is actually human. And I genuinely think like the insertion of, the market, our acceptance into full membership in society means we're now subject to market forces. And I think, you would not be if you had observed, say, straight dating, you would certainly notice that that's been subject to a sort of commodification a lot earlier.
Yeah.
I think this is what's like what gay men are experiencing now is what straight men have, and straight women as well, straight people have been dealing with for a lot longer.
Yeah.
And it's not healthy for anybody.
No.
And instead of giving it up, right? And instead of giving up what we might have had once, which was some sort of like way of some sort of social relation that could kind of exist at least at the margins.
Yeah.
Outside of that structure, well, we've given it up for all this acceptance, and we now have RuPaul on TV, and RuPaul has a fracking empire, and we get to, just die alone.
Well, it's also like the separation of like free love and like sexual liberation in like the neoliberal period and what it meant to have free love and sexual liberation during the working class period, like when working class struggle was at its height. And it wasn't, everyone should just have sex with everyone. That's liberating. Like being a porn star or like fucking 20 people is liberating. It was actually about economics and not having your love. It was about love. Well, having love being the key reason you have relationships versus economics, which is what marriage and like all relationships are based off of.
Right. Well, it's certainly love as a standard for kind of something meaningful beyond the cynical, right? I mean, it's sort of an ideal. An ideal of what a relationship can be is a loving one. And that could be a friendship relationship, and it can be all sorts of relationships. But it's certainly not one that you like negotiate on Grindr because somebody is like hits your pressure temperature curve of like distance away and attractiveness in a conventional sense.
No, it's horrible. Like I remember when I had it for a while, and it makes you sad. Like it doesn't make you happy. Like,
no. I think Grindr's corporate slogan is like, inspiring emptiness.
No, I would literally probably just ban Grindr and probably Tinder.
Nationalize it and shut it down.
Well, I mean, you could have a relationship matchmaking thing, but it should look nothing like either of those services.
Well, it's funny. I used online dating services that before the age where pictures were readily available.
Really?
Yeah, I mean they were like you could exchange pictures, but the idea that like that was front and center in your dating profile is actually a relatively novel invention, and it's hard to think about now. Yeah, and I think OkCupid added sort of profiles things, but I mean I was talking about some things that just don't even exist anymore.
Well,
but like, I mean no, I just mean it was New Zealand shit.
Oh, okay.
But like, certainly it was not the idea that was sort of totally front and center.
It shouldn't be either.
Yeah, well, not to say that's not like important. You're not. I'm not saying you're just totally shallow because you care what your potential sexual and romantic partners look like.
Yeah,
that's fine. You're allowed to be attracted to what you're attracted to. It's more that like there's something just from a purely sort of design perspective about what does it do to you when you replace all meaningful content with sort of a small number of categorizations that you sort of select from a drop down and a picture.
Yeah.
That's definitely going to have some effect on like just what your understanding of what you're up to is.
Well, these apps also are devoid of like a personality concept because there's plenty of people like, for one, maybe people aren't photogenic, and I'm like, oh, actually they're quite attractive, and they didn't have a good picture, which it's not the pinnacle. Like there's a lot of attractive people. I'm like, oh, if you run Grindr, I would go message you, but in person, like they're just completely awful or reactionary or something that's very off-putting, and they're no longer viewed as attractive. And
they
it kind
have
of
a podcast, for example.
but it kind of ignores all the like other components of attraction beyond just, oh, how even is your face and how nice is your hair and how like ripped is your body.
Yeah, the important things.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we're about at time. I don't want to bore people with
They're
our
so
opinions.
bored.
Bored. You're all bored.
Yeah.
It's because you're vapid. That's because you've been commodified.
Hey, you're not
Your
trapped.
your attention is commodified now, and we cannot hold it.
You're not trapped inside a house, bored out of your mind.
Yeah. Lucky you. If you're listening to this after the COVID-19 pandemic is over, congratulations.
You survived.
You won't understand what we were going through while recording this.
Bye, guys.
Bye.